we don't even have really the research for what keto does to women necessarily. A lot of what we have is been studied on male athletes, or we have some endurance type studies coming in. My husband, when he was preparing for his marathon, we were doing kind of a test to see if we could get him keto adapted for a marathon and how that would affect his performance. And that was like the first time that I was not carb cycling. I did it pretty strict for 2 months, and my hair was falling out.
Wow.
And I was getting cold extremities, numbness and tingling in the fingers. And so I realized that that was not the best thing for me. But again, that could work for somebody else. And in fact, if you have PCOS, you're not necessarily going to cycle in and out, nor if you're type 2 diabetic. Like, you probably need to stay in ketosis. But for the average woman, perhaps being in deep ketosis without the carbohydrate cycling, or that it's really a reset for your thyroid, for your leptin levels, right? So I think that's maybe where why we're using that. It just makes people feel better.
Today's show with Dr. Anna is brought to you by our pals over at HelloNed.com, leaders in a biodynamically and organically grown broad-spectrum hemp phytocannabinoid blend that's delivered in an organic MCT oil liquid. So I don't need to tell you, times are pretty uncertain right now. We don't know when the economies are going to reopen, if or when you'll be able to work again, when the gym will be open. We don't have our normal outlets. That creates unease that can compromise our sleep. So I personally use Ned's formulation to help me foster deep sleep without monkeying with my architecture. And if I ever go out to dinner, which I haven't done recently due to these lockdowns, but if I go to a friend's house or a relative's house and I know there's going to be wine there, and I might be tempted to consume alcohol, I have a full dropper of HelloNed's broad spectrum phytocannabinoid blend under my tongue and let it sit there for about 45 seconds. It takes that mental edge off and it helps give me kind of this mental sense of calm so that I'm not, I don't have that inclination to consume alcohol. So it can be utilized to enhance your sleep and take that mental edge off if you're worried about all this uncertainty in the world right now. So you can, try this at home for yourself, and I highly recommend this to all my clients for sleep by going to HelloNed.com. That's HelloNed.com. You can check out, I like the 750 milligram version. They have a bunch of different tinctures. They also have creams, coconut-based, infused with their organic phytocannabinoid blend that are great for your skin health. My wife loves them. We've actually found they can be pretty helpful in the bedroom as well for what that's worth. So definitely support your sleep and your body's stress response. It's a nice gift for mom as well by going over to HelloNed.com and use the coupon code HIH to save 15% off at checkout. Again, that coupon code is HIH. So let's cut back to it with Dr. Anna and talk about the mindset needed to maintain consistency when it comes to our feeding fasting patterns and our fitness program with fat loss top of mind.
So we're talking offline a little bit about mindset. I think that's a great point to drive home, where people are kind of putting off or procrastinating. And we're coming up on Easter Sunday, and you were saying some of the folks in your program are like, well, I'm not really going to start till after Easter. And we were talking about just like tips to offer to people, like how do you overcome your own hurdles or your own, it's not lack of confidence. How could you characterize kind of that ability to just keep procrastinating, improving your health?
Well, definitely. I think we all know that there's never that perfect day to start. You'll always, everyone's like, oh, I'll start on Monday after the weekend. But no, I think you just have to set those little goals for yourself. So I know for myself, even if it's the weekend and I know there's an event, it doesn't mean that all day long I'm going to be eating, the things that I wouldn't normally eat just because I know that night I'm having pizza. So in fact, even more so, if I know I'm going to indulge in something that isn't necessarily going to be the best thing for my body, I prefer to use the tools that I have. So I try to talk about it as like, you have the tools. Which ones are you going to use? You can eat your lower carb, high fat meals earlier in the day. That way you won't be as hungry when you go into these events. Or bring some of the healthy foods that you know how to make at this point to these family functions. So yes, we've got Easter coming up this weekend, and people are just thinking, well, it's just going to be a free-for-all, so I'm not even going to bother starting. I'm just going to take the weekend off. And then that's when your motivation, I just find, slides. So for me, I use tools like the intermittent fasting to either get ready for a day like that, or to then the next day give my body a break. So it's not about being restrictive, it's just about being kind to your body. And that's where it's a really interesting area, because for women, we do come to this place of, nutrition from the sense of like dieting. You're always either on a diet or you're off a diet. So there's this cultural thing that we carry around with us. And I think the more that I work with women, the more I realize that this is the biggest hurdle. And that at the end of the day, it's almost not about the food. Right? And this is where I would love to offer more help. And I think that's maybe where we're going with my group, because I'm realizing that that's such a big issue. So, I'm seeking help from others who are experts in that area. So we're going to be doing some more interviews and such, because I'm realizing that that's the big struggle for women.
So it's not about the food, then it's about the emotions, the mental game, if you will?
Yeah, I think if they just changed their viewpoint on food, right? And stop associating it with guilt or with emotions, then that's the first hurdle. Because I know that, if they reach for the wrong thing and they make a mistake and they eat carbs or whatever it is that they do, they will associate that with guilt, feeling like they've somehow failed. They're shameful of that, and then their motivation and their confidence suffers. And that's not key to success. You need to feel really good about yourself. And maybe if we just say it's not about the food, and it is just food, it's just that, like, eat it, move on, you've got a new day, right? And being a little bit kinder to ourselves.
So if someone does go off the deep end and have too many French fries or too much alcohol or whatever, what's a way to recover from that? Would you say, like, get some small wins, maybe with exercise, or how do you surmount that? Because that can even spiral. I noticed for myself, and I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but if you have like a cheat day, it's harder to like get back on eating healthy. So it kind of comes back to like what we were talking about. So there's this great book by Darren Hardy called The Compound Effect. So every little small thing that we do, whether we go exercise or eat healthy or go engage in bad behavior or whatever, it compounds and you start to do kind of more of the same. So do you find that just like some small wins, like maybe having a keto coffee or doing some exercise or having an avocado instead of French fries, like that begets more success?
For sure. I mean, I think the foundation has to be that you love your life. So for me, I love eating this way. So for me to go back to that on a Monday is actually very enjoyable, because I like how it makes me feel. So maybe like looking at that and first of all acknowledging, how do you feel your best? Do you feel your best when you're eating bagels? If not, then don't eat the bagels. Eat the things that you know make you feel well. So go back to that. For myself, I can now indulge in something like pizza or ice cream guilt-free, because the next day I will just do my little bit of fasting, and then I go back to like a fat-fueled meal to break my fast. And then that gets me back on track, and it's like it never happened. So I think that's part of life. Yeah. Especially if you have a family and you've got kids and you want to participate in those things. So I never tell my ladies not to do that. My program is a little bit different in terms of we don't go what some would call strict keto. So we do incorporate carb ups. So because we're incorporating some carbs, because I'm trying to respect their hormones, I just tell them, time it with these social outings or your Friday night movie night with your family, and it gives them a little bit of freedom. But as wonderful as that sounds, that freedom sometimes does send them into that spin, and it's like, well, I've had the pizza and now I feel lousy the next morning, now I'm craving more carbs. So I do my best to warn them of how they may feel, and give them some tools on how to combat that the next day. That's great. So it's just about arming them with several different tools and figuring which ones work for them.
You mentioned that this carb cycling and the hormones. Can you kind of expand upon that relationship there, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think because in the ketogenic world, it's just gaining popularity. So we don't even have really the research for what keto does to women necessarily. A lot of what we have is been studied on male athletes, or we have some endurance type studies coming in. We've got studies on rats. but how it affects women, we don't necessarily know. So it's a little bit of trial and error. And so I have definitely seen what ketogenic diet can do to women if they're not doing it, quote unquote, in a healthy, balanced way. I myself experienced it. So I've done several ketogenic studies on myself. And at one point I did it pretty strictly for 2 months straight with my husband when he was preparing for his marathon. We were doing kind of a test to see if we could get him keto adapted for a marathon and how that would affect his performance. And that was the first time that I was not carb cycling. I did it pretty strict for 2 months, and my hair was falling out. Wow. And I was getting cold extremities, numbness and tingling in the fingers. And so I realized that that was not the best thing for me. But again, that could work for somebody else. And in fact, if you have PCOS, you're not necessarily going to cycle in and out, nor if you're type 2 diabetic. You probably need to stay in ketosis. But for the average woman, perhaps being in deep ketosis without the carbohydrate cycling, or that it's really a reset for your thyroid, for your leptin levels, right? So I think that's maybe where why we're using that. It just makes people feel better.
Interesting. And on a time scale, on a weekly basis, maybe how many days out of 7 would you have a higher carb day?
So again, that would depend on the person. So some women might do it every 3 days, and that's where they feel best. But when we're talking about doing a little bit of bump up in the carbs, it's not necessarily eating, pizza and so on, although you can eventually get to that point. But, we're encouraging things like sweet potato, maybe a little bit of rice, some of the root vegetables or starchier vegetables. So we're trying to keep it really healthy so that they don't get the inflammatory effects of some of the not so healthy carbs. So anywhere from 3 to 7 days. So some people love a bigger carb up once a week. Usually the women who are doing it every 3 days will do just a little bit of a smaller one. For myself, I typically like to do it once a week.
Yeah. Me too. And do you pair that with a certain activity? I personally like squatting and deadlifting, and that requires a lot of muscles and stuff like that. So that's when I have higher carbs on that day.
Yeah.
Do you pair that with your activity, or is it just intuition?
Yeah, it's intuition, but definitely if I'm able to go out for one of my longer runs, that's what I like to do, just to use up that glycogen, because I really feel bogged down. For me, I love the carb up in the moment, but I definitely notice just that heavier feeling. So I like to burn up that glycogen the next day. So either I'll do a 10-kilometer jog, not high intensity, but just longer duration, or I'll do a leg day or something like that.
Yeah, That's great. Let's finish off. You mentioned earlier, we were talking offline on the broken metabolism and this notion that people that have done a lot of different diets over the years, yo-yo diets and so forth, tend to have a lower resting metabolic rate, a little bit more insulin resistant. How would you advise them to hit the reset? What tools would you suggest for them?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. And I don't think that we necessarily have the best tools out there yet. I think it's about creating routines, so making sure that their sleep patterns are on cue, that they're not snacking but sticking to meal times, that they're getting adequate protein, and honestly, fasting seems to help. So just allowing their insulin to come down and their body to be forced to know how to burn that fat. So reteaching that, because obviously with the yo-yo dieting and the slower metabolism, there is that component of insulin resistance, which happens. So often they even have a higher fasting insulin level as well, which is tough. So it takes some time, and it can take years to reset something like that. And it's the most painful thing to watch, because these women are the ones who are trying their best. They're working so hard at it. And I'm looking at their diets, and it's perfect, and I want them to see those results, and it's just that history has come with them. So I have to ask them to be patient and be kind, and just keep doing what you're doing, and let's heal your body, and work on those other things that we do have control over, and just, and hope that they just feel better all around, so they stay motivated to do what they're doing. Yeah. And the interesting thing is with women, they're still so focused on the number on the scale. Whereas we often don't see that changing. Like even I've noticed with certain women on the ketogenic diet, they're frustrated because the scale isn't showing a change, but they're taking their measurements and they're like, I don't understand it. My waist is 2 inches smaller, my thighs are smaller, like my clothes feel better. And it's because it's that change in muscle mass, like it's more likely that they're putting on the muscle and burning the fat.
Which is a good thing, but they're so wrapped up and convinced with the target weight, which is really like looking at calories. Like it doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, obviously you don't want to weigh 300 pounds necessarily, but the body, the lean mass to fat mass ratio is really, I'm glad you emphasized that because I was just with someone yesterday talking about that and they were concerned that they haven't lost weight, but they're getting stronger, they're more physically fit, so it's, we have to reframe all these things they're indelibly inked in our head, like the calories and then the weight and all that sort of stuff.
Definitely. And I asked them, well, how do you feel? And they said, well, I have more energy and my kids notice that I'm not snapping all day and my husband notices my mood is nice and even. I'm happier. I feel stronger. And I'm like, let's focus on that. Like, where did that get lost in the picture, along the way?
There's a lot of different schools of thought about how many meals people should have per day. And a lot of people come from, I need to have 6 or 7 small meals throughout the day. And that's kind of what they've been doing for many, many years. And keto is so different. You're kind of compressing that feeding window, maybe having 1 or 2 meals and a snack or something. I know everyone's different and individual and all that. But what have you found to be like the most successful when it comes to like how many meals and versus snacks and so on?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I definitely fell prey to the belief that we needed to have those 6 smaller meals a day. And for a long time, that's what I was preaching because, in a way that was better for people who were making bad choices to allow them to eat more frequently throughout the day. So they always knew that next meal was coming. So that works to a point. And, you can definitely get away with that for a long time. But, when I really looked at the research and what's going to be effective for not only weight management, but hormones and like long-term success, it all comes down to insulin, right? And keeping your insulin low. Well, what does that? Either not eating or eating very low carb, higher fat meals. So if we can even get people to move away from snacking and even focusing on, 3 solid meals a day, that's already going to have a huge impact on their insulin levels and their insulin sensitivity. So, allowing their foods to digest and their insulin to come nice and low between meals and getting that 4 to 5 hours between meals. Obviously, when we start with somebody new, we're not going to put them on 2 meals if they've been eating 6. So there's that transition phase. So at the start, I do give them snack options. I just keep them really, higher fat, lower carb so that they're not feeling that hunger. Because when you go off carbs, you're going to be craving and you're going to feel hungry for that first little bit. So I tell them at the beginning, I don't care how much you eat as long as you stick to these foods. And then eventually as they move through the program, they can choose to kind of give up the snacks and create these bigger meals. And then I kind of give them the framework on how to create those meals to be very satisfying so that they're not feeling hungry 2 hours after their meal. So, and that's very individual. And, I mentioned before, I find that for me, I like 2 big meals a day with like that afternoon, we'll call it a snack or a fat-fueled coffee to get me through. But there are days where I need a snack, I'll have a snack.
Yeah,
right?
and not worry too much about it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going off the rails. I like cashews or Brazil nuts, sometimes just like some whey protein with coconut oil. What are like 3 or 4 things that you go to?
I love coconut butter. Like I could just grab a spoon and take a couple spoonfuls of that, right? Macadamia nuts, but again, there's no stop button, so you can definitely overeat that. Like I could sit there and eat the bag. I love dark chocolate. That's my newest thing. And I have a sweet tooth, I'll be honest. So I do make keto ice cream as well, but now I find I can just do some really good quality dark chocolate and feel satisfied. And that'll be usually like my nighttime snack because I've always been a night eater. And that's a hard thing, like when you're watching TV or it's like the kids are finally in bed. This is what women do, right? The kids are finally in bed and out comes the popcorn, out comes the ice cream. That's a hard habit to break. So just replacing that with something like a little dark chocolate, I find to be helpful.
Great tip. Awesome. So your website again for folks, if they didn't watch the first video where we made it great keto coffee and some different options for you guys.
Yeah, so all my social media stuff is at Mom in the Glow. So my handle is at Mom in the Glow and it's momintheglow.com. And then my clinic website is vitalityforlife.ca.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.